Hello. My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. So, it has been a while since I've done sort of just like a top something list, like top 10, top 5, whatever, bookish related list. So I thought that we would talk about some of my favorite villains today. Now, I have two kind of like overall favorite villains, one being like iconic villain, the other one being more like new-ish, like more new series favorite villain, but the rest of these are just sort of in no particular order. And to me, when I think about great villains, part of what I'm thinking about is, are they memorable? Do they scare me personally? Like, some villains are scary enough that like I am personally afraid of them. Or are they scary for the characters, like the protagonists in the book? Like, am I consistently afraid for the protagonist because the villain is so effective? And I think that that's harder to do than you might think. Like, even, because I was trying to think of like, oh, who are some of my favorite like serial killer type characters from mysteries? And I could only think of a couple that I found genuinely like effective enough that I was either personally scared for like, it scared me because it was so well described, or I was like genuinely worried that our main characters wouldn't make it out of it. So yeah, I think that building good villains is a hard skill set, and like kudos to authors who are able to do that well. But like I said, most of these are in kind of no particular order, but I'll save probably my top 2 or 3 for the end. So first of all, and perhaps most like controversially, because Voldemort is like one of the most iconic villains ever. But I actually don't find him to be the most effective villain in the Harry Potter series. Like, yes, of course I'm scared of him, but like the one who genuinely made me upset and like scared for Harry was Umbridge. Like, I think that she is the scariest villain in the whole series because like she's plausible. Do you know what I mean? Like, Voldemort has all these special powers and he's like got like charisma to draw people to him or whatever, but like Umbridge is just like a bureaucrat unhinged. And like, we could maybe see some parallels to current day American politics there if you're so inclined to look for them. But just in general, like, she's so plausible that that's part of what makes her so scary to me. So Umbridge is like my favorite Harry Potter villain. And so I wouldn't put the villains in Harry Potter at the very top of my list, therefore, just because the big bad villain, while iconic, I don't find to be as effective as like one of the kind of side or sub villains. And then Crooked House in all of the Christie oeuvre has my personal favorite whodunit, like who of whodunit. I love the way that this mystery turns out, and I love the characteristics of the person who's done it. And I can't say any further because I don't want to spoil this book, but like, this is my favorite Agatha Christie villain. Therefore, I felt like it definitely belonged on this list. That's not a very meaningful comment, but like, if you've not read this book, read it. It's one of my very favorites from her, and I love the way that it all comes together. Next, I really like, there's a ton of different sort of villainous or like morally ambiguous characters in the Psy-Changeling series from Nalini Singh. Like, there's a lot of them. My favorite kind of villainous entity was the Council. And then, so like Ming Laban is like one of the good ones, but what was his name? Enrique Santos, I think. He's definitely the scariest, and like, especially early in the series, he looms large and then comes back in a very meaningful way, sort of in the midpoint of the books that have been released. So yeah, I like all of the kind of villainous entities in the Psy-Changeling series, but I'd say Enrique is the most villainous and the scariest. Speaking of scary, and speaking of like things that I can't get into details because I don't want to spoil anything, but like, the ultimate bad guy situation in the Natural series is fantastic. I love it. And especially for a YA book, I think is genuinely scary. For a YA contemporary in particular, like, I think YA and middle grade books definitely are able to kind of serve us some great fantasy villains. I think sometimes they struggle in contemporaries, and like, this is definitely the best sort of like villainous entity, villainous person situation that I've read in a YA contemporary type book. So definitely had to put this on the list. Then I wanted to pick a nonfiction choice, and I could definitely troll hard with what I picked. I chose to go a more straightforward route, which is I'll Be Gone in the Dark, and the villain being the Golden State Killer, who has subsequently been arrested and is awaiting trial. But the way that Michelle McNamara builds like dread, suspense, and just like disgust for who this unknown killer is throughout this book is so effective. And just reading about the crimes that this man committed, and just like I don't want to, get into too many details because I think you should sign up to hear the details on your own choosing, not just me casually mentioning them, but they are horrifying, and they're specifically designed to terrorize the victims in the moment and forever after that. Like, it's specifically designed to psychologically, like, mindfuck people, and therefore it is so scary, and, like, just the more you learn, the more you're just, like, horrified and scared. Like, this is a scary book. So I thought this was my best choice for sort of a non-fiction villain. Okay, and then I have a couple of picks for what I'm going to call anti-villains. So this is sort of like the villainous equivalent of an anti-hero, which are bad people who have some moral grayness to them, or some, like, you understand where they're coming from to some degree. Pretty much everyone in the library at Mount Char would classify in that group, because it is just an entire book filled with bad, violent people, but some of them are badder and more violent than others. Like, the father, I guess, would kind of be the ultimate villain in this, so I guess him. But, like, all of his children are anti-villains, basically, and some of them are closer to an anti-hero. Like, I think a couple of our main characters, like our protagonists, are, I would say, probably slightly shift from anti-villain to anti-hero, but, like, this is an entire book filled with very bad people doing very bad things. And then you gotta give it up for good old Gollum in Lord of the Rings. He is, like, one of the most kind of iconic anti-heroes, because you see where he's coming from. Like, you have compassion for this character, especially through the eyes of Frodo, and you, like, want him to do better, and you see how he's gotten into the situation he's in, but still he, like, does bad things, and, like, is not, at the end of the day, like, he is not really a good person, but I guess he's a good person who has trapped himself into a situation where he cannot help but be a bad person. I don't know. He's just very morally ambiguous, but I would ultimately call him an anti-villain, not an anti-hero, but one for whom we have a lot of sympathy. Okay, and then in terms of a contemporary, like, so we're in my top 3 now. These are, like, the rest of these are kind of unranked, but these are my top 3. In terms of a contemporary book that the villain in it genuinely scared me, I definitely decided to go with Mr. Yule in To Kill a Mockingbird, because I think especially because this is told through the eyes of a child, you get to see him as being as scary as he is, and, like, a lot of his sort of whatever kind of privilege he has in the situation that he has created, I think you see through that because of Scout's point of view, and you see how scary he is, and kind of the way that this novel culminates is genuinely a really scary thing, in my opinion. Like, there's a lot of genuine jeopardy to it, basically. So yeah, I just think that he's a really effective antagonist in this book. Okay, and then my last 2, I have one that is, like, my most iconic villain ever, like, classic iconic villain, and one that's, like, a new favorite. So new favorite is Hugh as the sort of secondary villain, but really Roland in the Kate Daniels series, because he is verging on being an anti-villain. Like, there are sympathetic qualities to him, but just, like, how powerful he is and how far his reach is. Like, for most of this series, you don't know what Kate's gonna do. Like, you don't know how she's gonna prevail, because he is just she is amazing, but he is, like, so powerful that you just don't know what's gonna happen. This kind of reminds me, maybe, like, as a side shout out to Lord of the Rings, like, how you don't know how they're gonna defeat Sauron. Like, how are they going to destroy this ring? Like, this seems impossible. I think you get some of the vibes of that from Roland in this, of, like, he's just such an overwhelming villain that our heroes have to be even more competent and, like, amazing, because the obstacle they're up against is so big. So definitely the villains, or Roland in particular in this, but, like, generally the bad guys in Kate Daniels, I love that they're always, like, they're never just sort of, like, plotting, like, dumb bad guys. They're always smart, they're always powerful, they're always interesting, and Roland is, like, the apotheosis of that in this series. And then finally, the most iconic villain and my personal favorite is the White Witch in The Magician's Nephew. I think because, I don't know, she's just, like, such a classic baddie, and, like, I love that she is a female villain that I don't feel like there's a lot of, like misogyny in her villainy, which for the time period I think is particularly commendable. Maybe somebody will remind me of something I'm totally misremembering about her, but I think she's just portrayed as being like a stone cold like badass, basically just like pure evil. Like she's basically like the honey badger of middle grade fantasy. Like, white witch don't give a fuck. Like, she just will keep going and keep coming at you. She comes back again and again. I love that we get to see her origin story in The Magician's Nephew. So like, this is the first book chronologically in the series, but was not the first book published. But if you read it in the order of publication, which I personally don't recommend, but like to each his own, it must have been so cool to have seen her and then come back and get her origin story. So yeah, I just love seeing how she develops in the series and like the different forms of evil she takes on. But I just think she's such an effective villain, and she's sort of like she's just iconic and sort of like archetypal at this point. Like, it's taking the idea of this like cold, powerful queen, which is definitely something that's present in fairy tales and like kind of folk stories, and I think it just for our era is like the best version of that we've ever gotten. So I just find her genuinely scary. I find her really effective and just like my favorite villain, definitely. So I hope you guys enjoyed that little foray into some of my favorite villainous characters. Definitely let me know if you have some favorite sort of iconic ones or kind of like new favorite villains. Let me know if you agree with any of my picks in terms of like, yeah, girl, that bitch was scary or whatever. Definitely let me know that in the comments. But yeah, I think that will do it for this little listicle video. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below. I think that will do it. I hope you guys are having a really lovely day, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!